All right. All right, we are going to call this meeting to order. Ms. Humphries, will you call the roll, please?
President Osborne.
Here.
Vice President Holcomb.
Here.
Member Gresham.
Here.
Member Kazi.
Here.
Member Spear.
Here.
All are present.
All right. Will Mr. Holcomb with his big beard lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
So a motion by Ms. Spear, second by Ms. Kazi. Please vote. The motion has been adopted. Item 2.1, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Baca.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Governing Board and Executive Team. Our state testing is winding down, so I want to say thank you to our staff and families for their work in helping our students prepare for and maneuver through the last 2.5 weeks of testing, but also a very special thank you to our students for the ones who took the test and I know did their very best. We're pleased that we have many of our Madison Virtual Academy students who came in to the district office in order to be administered that test. So I just want to say a special thank you to that. Governing Board, I had shared with you earlier, but now I'll announce it publicly, that Close Up, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan civic education organization that has worked with students for over 50 years, is now partnering with Governor Ducey and the Arizona Cardinals for Civic Matters Arizona. It's a statewide competition and it really provides a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for students to have civic education experience. The program is inviting young Arizona students in grades 8 through 11 to apply, and the selected winners will take part in a thrilling all-expense-paid trip to Washington, D.C., scheduled for June 22nd through the 25th. They will meet with elected officials, experience historic sites, and get a behind-the-scenes glimpse of how our government works. Madison has been invited to participate. So a total of 12 current 8th grade students from Madison will be selected among only 250 8th through 11th grade students throughout the state of Arizona. They will be flown free of charge on the Arizona Cardinals team plane with some very special guests. One Madison teacher will serve as their chaperone. Madison's 8th grade students are currently in the process of beginning to determine whether they wish to apply or not. If they do, they would be writing and submitting a 500-word essay about community and civic involvement, young people who have made a difference, or how to build a more perfect union. Each of our schools will select students to participate in the program with the goal of reaching students from all communities and backgrounds. The governor and Arizona Cardinals have asked schools to consider selecting students who might not otherwise have the opportunity to visit our nation's capital in order to further develop their civic engagement. So a special thank you to the Arizona Cardinals and Governor Ducey and working with the Close Up Foundation to provide this opportunity to our students. We wish it could be more. We initially were given an allocation of more, but because the demand is so high, they had to cut back on all of the districts in terms of the number of students who would be able to attend and participate. So I look forward to giving you more updates as we come closer to that event. So that concludes my report.
And Dr. Baca, if we do participate and one of our students is selected, I would love for them to have them come and present to the board and tell them what they found out.
And Dr. Osborne, members of the board and executive team, that is the plan, is after the trip to make sure that there's a report that's given for the 12 Madison students who have participated. We'll invite them to do that. They won't be ours anymore, but hopefully some of them will be able to come back and share their experience with us.
Sounds great. All right. Anything else, Dr. Baca? All right, board member reports. Mr. Holcomb.
Just one thing, I got the opportunity to go to Rent at the Madison, and it was a phenomenal experience because it was, the theater was packed. And the thing that came out of it, that most people, a number of people had never been there before, and the consistent thing was how much better than was other facilities because of the parking and the sound. They couldn't, and they raved about the sound. And that's all I have to report this time. Thanks.
Ms. Gresham.
Thank you. Only that I just want to highlight and show my appreciation for all the families and our staff and everyone. It's been a long year with the busing and all the shortage, employees and the MAC. And so I just want to thank everyone for their patience with what we're trying to handle. And our sports are winding up, so I've just been thinking about all the parents that have been driving their students to all the sporting events, and so I just really appreciate everyone's support, and we all just really came together and made it through. So thank you.
All right, Ms. Spear.
Nothing to report except thank you to all of our IT folks who helped make this week a success. I know that there were issues. Inevitably, there are always going to be issues with the testing. But I understand that today went very well, and I'm glad to hear that. And thank you to all of the students and staff. That's it.
Ms. Kazi.
Thank you. I heard that there was some access issues, so blessings to the teachers and students who worked their way through that. That can be so stressful since we have limited time, so thank you. Also, I was really thrilled to see that we had some input to the board from parents that we'll hear later in the meeting who are reviewing our proposed budget. I was thrilled to see that public input and taking the time to review and give us some feedback. I don't recall that we've, except in years where we're proposing cuts, that we've seen that in the past, and I hope this is a trend that we continue to see grow, because we love to get that kind of input. It is incredibly valuable. And then finally, it's spring, so for IB schools, it's exhibition and community project time. So if you get asked to help out or volunteer or support a student, I hope you will say yes, because it's a really important part of their learning journey. Thank you.
Great. And I have nothing to report. Item 3.1, any need to call executive session? Hearing none. Item 4.1, call to the public. We do not have a general call to the public. We have one for item 6.2, so we will call that person up when we get to that appropriate item. All right, do I have a motion to approve the consent items?
Oh, so moved.
Ms. Gresham with the motion,
Second.
Mr. Holcomb with the second. Please vote. Alrighty, the motion passes. Now on to item 6.1, the legislative update, and I've been rumored that I have a little bit of a role in this. So what I attempted to do for this report is just kind of give you a snapshot. It doesn't cover all the bills, or I'd be here for 20 minutes, but I want to give you guys a sense of theme, timing, some of the other issues. Please feel free to ask lots of questions. There's a lot of uncertainty going on with the legislature right now, and mainly because, and I'll get to it in a minute, that we have too much money. First slide, please.
Dr. Osborne, you may want to, for the people who are watching and all of your fans, tell them why we're having you do the legislative update.
In my day job, I spend a fair amount of time at the Capitol representing the good companies of Arizona and the best municipality in the state. Kind of set the level set for the session. We went into the session with record pre-session turnover. We had 13 members resign in the interim. And we were already dealing with about a little more than a third of new members, and then they turned over. And literally, a lot of these people came to the Capitol at a one-day orientation and were voting 3 days later. So that creates a interesting uncertainty and change. And remember, most of the freshman legislators have only been through a COVID session, so they hadn't really interacted much with the public. They had weird protocols, and they didn't know their other members, believe it or not, even though they were in session for 6 months, because they would go in, vote, and leave, and there wasn't a lot of the normal social interactions. A very high level of bills were introduced, 1,738, 172 Title 15 bills, to give you a sense. This is on the very highest end that I've seen. So far, there's been about 118 bills signed. I anticipate by the end of the year will be between 300 and 350 bills that actually get signed. Last year, we were about 400, but that was because we had a lot of repeat bills that died because we called them COVID casualties. 2022 campaigns are really impacting operations. Members aren't showing up because they're out campaigning. And if you're in the Republican majority and you have 16 votes and you need all 16, if one of your members decides to go to Bullhead City for a campaign event, a certain number of bills don't get to be voted, people get annoyed, it creates a little bit of tension. Elections, and reform, and that's like, we hear a ton about over 100 bills introduced. Give you a level set, normally about 35 bills on elections, and a lot of them are run by the counties or the more election professionals. This year, all kinds of stuff. The vast majority of these bills are failing and not going anywhere. They're moving a little bit, but they're dying. There are some on early permanent voter and some other things that are going to make it through, some enhanced IDs for vote by mail. You probably all heard about the one bill that had so many election reforms that the Speaker of the House assigned it to all the committees in the legislature. I've been lobbying for 25 years and have never seen that. That's not a message. I don't know what is. Next. So here are the key themes that I would say, and this is going to lean more on the Republican because they're running the show, and I can always answer about where the Democrat caucuses are pushing. But the first thing is we're seeing a lot of these kind of Virginia bills that they looked at the election for the governor of Virginia, and they said he ran on protecting parental rights, CRT ban, back to basics kind of instruction, and all of a sudden these are crisis issues in Arizona. They're not, as we all know, but that's been the focus, and they focus on Scottsdale and some of the school districts in Chandler as these shining examples of how school districts are run amok and that we need to tamp down. And so we saw a ton of bills. Not that many have passed, but a lot are getting a considerable amount of discussion. Prop 208 battles. There is that continual battle between the legislature, who wanted to do flat tax, did not like Prop 208, sued to have it thrown off the ballot. And so a lot of you seeing stuff that's kind of punitive towards those efforts. And that issue created a lot of uncertainty. You know, what's the court going to do, the timing of the court, and that played out legislatively. I call it the COVID backlash. There's still a view at the legislature that districts got too much COVID money, we're awash in money, and they're still grumpy about the shutdowns, even though we've been in school for a long time. Sad thing is, very little focus on learning loss. I mean, I was scrolling through the bills, and I saw very few bills that really got in and said, what are we doing to remediate kids? And nothing in the budget other than the governor's summer school camp, which is a non-budget item because it's using our funds. All this means there's a lot of churn and not much production. So you'll see a lot of bills with 172, and I'm guessing 20 or 30 may pass. Next slide, please. All right. So there was a famous rapper had a great song called More Money, More Problems. I used this slide in the last 3 years because it applies in most of the years recently. So we just got news that we got an extra $1 billion in surplus. So we have a $4.9 billion surplus with $1.9 billion ongoing. Once the final court decision is made on 208, I think we all assume that it's going to be declared unconstitutional. That will rise to a $5.27 billion with $1.57 billion in ongoing revenues. Starting, some legislators are starting to worry about a recession, not in the immediate next year, but in the horizon. What's driving the budget? Our economy is booming, but inflation, and when most of your money comes from sales tax, inflation is good for sales tax money. Doesn't mean it's good for consumers, but it's good for everything. So there's all of these big ideas to spend all this money, and there's no agreement yet, and very little agreement. So the first big expenditure pot is the Speaker and the Governor, primarily the Senate President's been involved, want to create a state water finance authority. And the idea here is to be able to help move water around more efficiently. Phenomenal idea, hard to put together, and so they're struggling to put it together. It's taking time, a lot of stakeholder, but that could eat up several $100 million of the budget. Flat tax 2.0, basically adjusting the flat tax to get around the referendum or maybe cut more aggressively. And the flat tax now is triggered with Senator Boyer, who says I'll only vote for the flat tax 2.0 if I get an education grand bargain that includes vouchers and $800 and $900 million for additional K-12. A lot of the Republicans say that's a horrible idea, and because that would also eat into the State Water Authority, so the mess continues. A lot of focus on transportation and infrastructure, a lot of one-time road projects, I-10 widening, a lot of transportation projects. So the fear, and I know Ms. Garvey is going to be concerned, is we're going to see likely a redo of the time frame from last year's budget where we go into June. They're now also talking what we call the skinny budget, where they just pass a baseline budget and put $2 billion, a whole bunch of the money into a fund, a rollover for the following year, hoping that the Republicans are hoping they'll have a bigger majority, and they can then spend the money the way they see fit. I don't think that's going to occur because if I'm the governor, it's the last time I have the ability to influence. So all this being said, stay tuned, we got time to finalize the budget. Oh, yes,
Can I ask a quick question on this slide, or do you want to wait?
Oh, you can go.
I just want to clarify, because I'm a little confused. So Prop 208, so part of it was declared unconstitutional, right? The education
Right.
funding piece, but then the tax piece is still up in the air. Can you clarify?
So the court just finally, I think the Supreme Court, I believe, has to finally rule. They took advisement from the lower court. The lower court says it's going to violate the expenditure limit, and I believe it has to go up to the Supreme Court where they'll finally rule. But all the trends show that they're going to violate the expenditure, which would declare the tax unconstitutional. So that's kind of where, and when that happens, and that money is theoretically, that obligation is freed up. And so there's more money. So a couple, the first bill is a bill that we're all familiar with, the SCR 1050. This is the bill that raised the temporary expenditure limit, very important bill. And luckily that passed, and so we have a year reprieve. They only did a year because they are waiting to see what's going to happen long term. Now here are some of the kind of, you can kind of see a theme. 2112, that's the redo of the CRT bill, banning critical race theory. That was in the budget. Last year, the courts threw out the way they bundled all the bills, and so that bill is a redo, seeing how it fits that kind of Virginia pattern. The other big theme that we're seeing is the ability and increased rights of parents to access all kinds of school materials. And so the first example of that is Representative Pignarelli's book. It basically says you got to show the card catalog to all parents, and so they can go through all the books and make sure there's nothing, quote, objectionable. So what you'll find here, and one of my fears is, depending on how many of these bills, and that's not the most onerous one that's moving through, that we're going to have to dedicate some resources to all this kind of IT work. And when we get to 1121, those requirements are robust. Similar on that parent theme, requiring districts to have visitation, so parents have the right to go into the classroom and see what's going on. See the theme again. scary things are happening, quote, in the classroom, we need to have parents come. As we all know, schools are very generous about letting parents in the classroom to see what's going on. We are a customer service-oriented organization. Same thing, parental rights, educational records, that's Mr. Kaiser. And I've tried to kind of categorize the bills that are moving, so these are ones that I think are likely to pass. Provides mandated access to all child records, including their mental health records, and there's a fear that schools are somehow hiding probably LGBTQ issues and other things from parents, and so they want the ability to access those. 2026, this was actually one that kind of worked, actually progressing education and trying to address it. Basically, on the third grade reading holdback provision, it makes sure that you can only be held back for 1 year and not on multiple years. It requires annual plans that districts have to present, and then it tweaks the literacy endorsement. Another anti-COVID theme, 2086, this prohibits DHS from ordering us to make our kids get vaccinated. And one of the more interesting ones was an anti-ASBA bill, and it failed, but it basically made ASBA meetings public record. They were in a similar attack on the League of Cities where they wanted to change the budget for the League of Cities because they didn't like the League of Cities because they were a problem in the tax package, so they figured they'd punish them this way. So this is some bills of interest that we're seeing in the education front. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that there's a big school transparency bill, and this is the bill that looks like it has the best chance of going, but I think as of today, they don't have the votes in the House because Representative Joel John, former teacher, who's on the Republican side, thinks the bill is less than ideal. So what this bill does is it requires a posting in a searchable database of all materials provided in the instructional setting. And there's lists that you have to do for some materials, there's posting requirements, and it has to be on a searchable database. So you can imagine the amount of work this is going to take for us to compile this, and the amount of work that teachers are going to have to do to make sure that all their materials are continually on the website. Because if they don't, parents, the AG, the state school superintendent can file a complaint, and there's penalties associated with that. Some of the things that are, there's also a new 72-hour rule for posting anything that's diversity, action-oriented civics, or social emotional learning. You know, you can see how there's a real theme that if schools would just get back to doing back to basic stuff, we could really progress education. You can see that theme. Senator Bartow is one of the most conservative members, so it's not surprising that it's coming out of here. And then also, there's going to be a new right for parents to have access to teacher training materials. I kind of harken back to our really robust process that we had in our math adoption, and the number of parents that availed themselves to review the math curriculum. And I think there's going to be a lot of money spent for a very little amount of access. So hopefully the bill will not go to the floor, but there is a lot of pressure on Mr. John right now to pass this bill. Next slide, please. Now, one of the more interesting bills, and one that I think is probably making Ms. Garvey nervous, and I don't think it's going to go, but and I think there's some good things and some bad things, mainly good things in the concept, but not in the kind of the execution and the lack of input. And so there has been every year, it seems like the legislature says, hey, we want to really take a big step at streamlining the school finance system. It never happens because, one, it's really complex. You really have to plan it out. You really got to make it either cost neutral or know where it goes. You really need a lot of lead time and input. So the ATRA, which is the taxpayer organization, I think some of the charter school advocates and others have been working with Representative Udall on a kind of a concept. And ATRA's approach is really to take and try to get as many districts off using bonds and overrides as possible. And so what the bill does is it allows districts, if they have no bonds or overrides, to opt into the Charter Additional Assistance Fund. So the idea, and this is also designed for those districts who can't get bonds and overrides to get them some more money. But I think what they're hoping is that districts like ours will see this as such an appealing process that we're going to dump our bonds and overrides and venture into the state system. If you looked at the fiscal note prepared by JLBC, they don't think it's going to be as robust a exit from the system. In order for us to opt into that system, we would have to have a board vote and then take it to our voters that we were to be opt into that system. A lot of negative impact on rural schools from some of the initial economic analysis. That makes the Senate president very concerned about that. She said that publicly. It's very hard to legislate around the Senate president if she's concerned. So it's I think it's going to start a longer conversation. Next slide, please. So the other part of it, too, is they're going to replace results-based funding with A and B rates. So some of this stuff probably has some value and some interest. They've tried to eliminate a lot of these formulas, the Teacher Experience Index and the additional teacher compensation money, but then trade it off with a 2.5 base increase. So some of these things, if the math works, makes some sense. They do similar things on the transportation side where they try to streamline the transportation formula and let you take it either as a per pupil basis or based on route miles. So there's some good stuff in there, but it was presented at the last appropriation hearings with 10 minutes of public comment on each side. And it's just not cooked yet. And so I don't know if they're going to be able to fully cook it, but it is something that you're going to see something in the future. And ideally, what it would do is it would progress a little bit, and then everyone would sit down over the interim and really work this through. Because the good news is, if we still have these surpluses, you can use those surpluses to blend this and make it work, and so that no district is negatively impacted. Next slide, please. So what's next? I don't know, other than I'm anticipating that we're going to have a long road to hoe in terms of just getting people to make decisions. And because, if you think about it, we got 13 new members, we got a small margin, we have more money than we've ever had in the state ever. And these are hard decisions, and you want to do it right, and there's not a lot of agreement to do that. And if one person on the Republican caucus comes off the budget is frozen unless there's a deal with the Democrats, and that's not going to happen because the Democrats don't want to support the tax cut. So we just spin around like a top until it gets to be late June, and then everyone has to make a decision. And all those people who are running for office don't get to campaign because they're caught down at the Capitol, and they're also not allowed to fundraise from lobbyists because we're in session, so they're going to be extra grumpy at their fellow members. So that's what's going on at the Capitol. Any questions?
I was curious if the curricular materials, if that would apply to any extracurricular, say like mock trial or anything like that.
I think it could, depending. I'd have to look at the, and I think Art Masterpiece, anything that goes into the school.
Model UN.
All that stuff would have to be. Now, there are some, in the Bartow bill, there are some copyright protections and other things, so you cannot require a copyright. And depending on what kind of material it is, you just have to provide an index, or if there's materials that you can find for free, you just need to provide a web link. But you can just imagine for a teacher who says, I'm going to pull these news articles off of a crane, put it on a PowerPoint, now that has to be posted, documented, and yeah, no one's going to. And it's going to be very tough to access. You really need a library specialist to run all this stuff. Other questions?
A quick question related to, the Republican is in control, but just barely. And that may be an opportunity for ideas from the other side, some of them. Are there any of the ideas that have been advanced from the Democratic caucus that you think might get some legs in order to help pass some other things?
So there's Senator Bowie in the Senate who is willing to work with Republicans, and he's made the offer to horse trade on some stuff potentially. They haven't got to that point yet. I think that the tricky thing is for the Republicans, to them, the flat tax is the holy grail of the issues for that. And if you can't agree on the flat tax, and sometimes I've seen where they've piecemealed the budget out, so some Democrats vote on this piece of the budget because the real conservatives over here don't want to vote for it, but the core bill over here, I've seen it kind of done piecemeal, but it's really hard to do. And I don't see that happening, but you have a few Democrats who are either leaving the body, who I think are willing to have that conversation, but it hasn't happened yet. Ms. Spear.
I, for the most part, know the answer to this question, but just for old time's sake, I'll go ahead and ask. Is there an opportunity for Madison to provide some support for some of these Republican legislators that are floating, like the bills that with regards to, curriculum on demand, things of that nature? Is there an opportunity for Madison to be a leader and support educating those individuals so that we can help them understand that not only is this an unfunded mandate, and of course not use those phrases, but demonstrate what we already have available on our website, through our teacher websites, so that they may see that this is a solution in search of a problem.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. The interesting thing for me is the charter schools with the Republican caucus for years have been the, fair-haired kids, and if they want to get out of something, they just say, we're out. Not this time. And so the districts and the charters are aligned on a lot of these accountability, or not accountability, a lot of the openness kind of issues. I know Representative John worked with the school business officials, a whole series of education stakeholders said, I'll support the bill, but I need this amendment. And so far, what I've heard is he's staying strong on it. So, but yeah, I think I can reach out to the advocates and, highlight some people who could use some bolstering. I mean, the interesting thing with that grand bargain is on the additional $800 million, the condition for Senator Boyer is that there has to be ESA expansion. Mm-hmm. Well, Representative Udall and Representative John don't support ESA expansion. They're probably more than open to fund and do a grand bargain, but not at so the leveraging is immense. That's all I can say. And then there's all the non-budget issues that are also being leveraged. There's quite a few that I'm involved with, not in a good way, but that there's all these side deals that are happening as well, and those are equally as controversial.
Would you just please keep us posted on where we might be able to make an actual incremental difference? I've, been around long enough to understand what works and what doesn't, and have often gotten discouraged. So I would be interested in any information from you as to where we could affect change meaningfully.
Yeah, and I think the good news is a lot of the stuff is gotten washed out. I mean, I could have gone through a list of really bad education bills, and Representative Udall has, and others have just, and Senator Boyer have taken the really extreme stuff and just kind of, but at some point they get leveraged and pushed too, and so it's definitely an interesting time.
One last comment.
Yes.
One of the things that I find difficult, and I know that in speaking with members of our public, staff, teachers, parents, is how to identify how much of this is theatrics and posturing, and how much of it is actually meaningful and likely to come to pass. And so in addition to letting us know how else we could meaningfully affect change, please keep us posted on which part of this is transactional theatrics and how much of this is likely to actually pass. Because we've seen atrocious bills before, and everybody gets hysterical, and then nothing happens, and it's wasted energy. So
Yep.
it's hard for me to look through this list and not know which ones are wasted energy and which ones we really need to dig in on.
That's why you hire a lobbyist.
Oh, gosh, well, that's why we have you, pro bono advice, so.
I double-
Counselor, if you could support us in that.
No, I think what I try to do is flag some of the bills that were through the process far along that they had a legitimate opportunity to pass. Because what happens and what people don't realize is leadership on both sides knows that there's certain bills coming out of the other house that the speaker or the president says, my members really want this to pass through. Can you please clean it up on the other side, and vice versa? And that happens quite a bit. And it happens quietly, or things are modified. And that's why you see stuff start out as really robust and aggressive. And by the time it gets, to the end of it's either been modified or it doesn't show up on a floor agenda because there aren't the votes, and the leadership takes the hit for not putting it on. So,
Thank you.
Ms. Gresham.
I just want to add real quick too, and thank you for this presentation, it was very helpful. So in addition to, if you can keep us informed on that through Dr. Baca or however, but also if Dr. Baca and Ms. Garvey, if there are things that come up that you see, that will really affect us as a district, that would be good to know too, and any, how it would affect our district would be good.
Dr. Bart.
So, Ms. Gresham, Mr. President, members of the board and executive team, the manner by which we advise is through the Madison Advocates. So what we do is when these types of things that Dr. Osborne discuss, I try to provide a context of what it means to Madison and how it would impact us and affect us. And then the next thing would be that I would be happy to also keep you informed of anything that is shared through them of any of these bills where you could help and advocate for. And I think then we probably want just a small follow-up at our next governing board meeting so that you can update the board, as that's the way in which you can communicate with them in terms of where we are and what they can possibly do.
Yeah, and on the, like the finance, we do legislation, Ms. Garvey, if you have specific comments, not just for the district, but broader, I'd be happy to refer those to anyone who will listen down at the Capitol. And I think it's always helpful, and I know ASBA does a decent job, and so do the other alphabet soup groups, in saying, here's what this bill means to some of the districts, and then, and I know it takes quite a bit of work to produce that, but that's, and I would always appreciate on some of these consolidation, what makes sense from your perspective and what doesn't, what really streamlines and what is, because I know there are some other agendas behind some of this stuff, but if there's a meeting of the minds and we can benefit from some of it, always take those opportunities. All righty. Yes. Okay. All right. Any other questions, thoughts? Item 6.2, community education salaries and student waitlist update. Dr. Baca, do you want to introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team. As you know, we are having issues, all districts are having issues across the board in regard to our salaries and retention of staff, especially classified staff. And so in this regard, we are particularly being hit with our Madison Adventure Club, our before and after school MAC program. Community ed is also being affected in our early childhood program, our preschool, and so forth. But what we want to be able to state is we understand and we know that currently we have more students on the wait list for next school year than we have accepted for MAC. So what we want to do is we want to be able to address it in order to ensure that we can accept as many families as possible, because we value their choice of coming to Madison and so forth. I want to acknowledge the outstanding job that our our community education department has done under the leadership of Ms. Keisha Breiling. I want to appreciate our MAC workers that throughout COVID, they sacrifice to come in and still take care of our kids before and after school. And so we want to approach this knowing and appreciating the current staff that we have. So in general, I want to just foreshadow what to expect at our next board meeting when we bring salary schedules and so forth. The best way for us, because when we deal with these salaries, especially with classified salaries, we then put ourselves in a situation where we have compressed salary schedules because certain groups get it, others don't. But in order to address this immediate issue and problem, we are going to want to separate out the community education salary schedule from our other salary schedules for our classified staff. So it will be independent, so we are able to make adjustments to those schedules. We are looking at how can we make sure we retain our current MAC workers so we don't lose any more while we recruit new. So we all know that we have to be competitive with the job market and the minimum hours that are hourly wages. So it would be looking at a significant increase, possibly anywhere in the range of, and I'm going to go way low, 10% up to possibly even 17% for some. What that will do is just keep us competitive. It doesn't mean it's going to translate naturally into more workers, because companies will let you know that even though they've raised it, they still have a difficult time recruiting and retaining staff. But that's the first part. So we can retain our staff, that they have a natural progression, that after a certain number of months with Madison, they kick into a different salary after those so that they have something to look forward to and remain. But I don't think that's going to solve the immediate need of accepting more students into MAC for next school year. In order to do that, we are going to have to consider, and that's the feedback we need from the board, with the understanding that currently our MAC program is a licensed program. So is our preschool program. We want to continue having our preschool program licensed through the state. It's important for the quality and for the safety and security of our preschoolers that we do that. However, we want to suspend our licensing with the state for next year so we can assess then whether or not we go back to that. What that will allow is that will allow us to not to have as many MAC workers to supervise students in our before and after school care. It will also allow for us to be able to have certain employees hired for MAC that are high school, for instance, that won't be required from licensing to be supervised directly. Another area where not being a licensed program will do is the way in which we are now required to check in and check out students, which frees up workers to be with students as opposed to handling that process. So, we thought long and hard about it, and we feel as though by doing that, we can definitely turn the tide and immediately begin accepting more families off the wait list now so that they know they have a guaranteed spot for MAC for next school year, if we were not even to employ any additional workers, which we think we still can. So Ms. Garvey is analyzing what that means in terms of rates that we may need to charge, because obviously if we increase salaries, the rates we charge our families will have to increase proportionately. It means that it will affect what our current MAC workers do in terms of supervision and job duties. It would modify that. And so we're working through all of that. No action needs to be taken by this board if we are to forego any of our licensing for MAC. We just would forego that for next school year. But we want to make sure that based on what I'm sharing with you, you understand that when we bring forward the salary schedule for next board meeting, MAC will be separate, community education will be separated out. We're going to take care of the MAC employees in terms of the increase to their hourly wages to retain who we have and hopefully recruit more. But no action would need to be taken with the licensing. So executive team is here to be able to answer any questions you might have regarding this, and we'll be happy to answer it in the best way we know how at this given time.
So before we take questions, why don't we have our one call to the public come up, and then we'll have a discussion. So, yeah, Angelica Ponder?
Yes. Last
Welcome.
name sounds familiar. A little bit. Yes, it's Angelica Ponder, and I am a parent at Madison Heights. I have a third grader. And the first thing I want to say is thank you so much to you, to the teachers, and to any aides that have been supporting us, especially during this difficult time. We know it takes a village to raise children, and we know it's a very important job, and we appreciate it. That's the first thing. Second, I know that you are trying to figure out the best way to tackle the MAC challenges. I am extremely happy, and I can only speak for me, but I know that I keep in touch with many parents. I am extremely happy with Principal Gossett and with the MAC leaders and the community that we have at Madison Heights. And I would like to continue to keep it that way. Although I'm only there for another year, I think it's important to continue to keep the trust that's already built in the school system. My main concern, or my reason for addressing you today, is that we are seeing those rates extremely low, and it's very difficult to remain competitive in this environment. We are all seeing it in our own businesses, but increasing 10 to 17% only moves the rate from $13, which the minimum wage in Arizona is $12.80, so we're just those 20 cents, to only $14.30, so $14.30. That still keeps us a very, very low and not a competitive place. Any of us driving down the road, we will see so many business advertising for $15, $17 an hour. So one of my biggest concerns as a working parent is how we can, as Dr. Baca said, on the same page as you, how can we continue to retain the talent that we have there? Where right now at Madison Heights, we have currently 2 MAC leaders that are leaving before the end of the school year. How are we going to continue to retain those? Not only that, but how do we find the qualified individuals that can take care of our kids? It's not just how can we get the people, bodies, but how can we find the right talent? So that is a big, big concern for me. The increase is not enough, in my opinion. And I am concerned about the licensing being removed for check-in and check-out, although it was posed as a timing issue. It honestly only takes as a parent a couple of seconds to sign in on the iPad and check out my child.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, I will end right at 3 minutes. Great. I appreciate any questions. All right, thank you. All right, discussion. Mr. Holcomb.
Yeah, I think you may not have the answer tonight. I appreciate that we're getting a preview of this. That is extremely helpful. But what would be helpful to me in looking at this is what are we giving up when we give up the licensing versus what, the gain. So it's really a, positive and negatives is this is where we're at. This is what the changes would be, if we gave up the license, and this is what we think we gain. Because I agree that we need to have a much more robust MAC program, not because it's bad, but because it's good, and because it's something I think is a major benefit to the district. But we need to be able to bring more people into it. And that may be also, as you talked about, raising rates. But for us to really make that decision, really have to see what we'd be giving up by giving up the license. And if you, to the extent you can answer that tonight, that's great, but that's part of what we need.
Thank you. Mr. Holcomb, Mr. President, members of the governing board and executive team. I'll introduce it by saying the part that I know, and then I invite any of our other folks to chime in. Financially, right now we get a subsidy because of the COVID relief funds that would expire after next year, and then we wouldn't have it anyway. So what we would give up for next year is a $30,000 subsidy. But again, that would be just for next year. It doesn't continue, that subsidy wouldn't continue past next year. Ms. Marshall or Ms. Garvey, I guess Ms. Garvey, anything else financially, or Ms. Marshall, anything else financially, and then anything else non-financially that would be given up.
Thank you, Mr. Holcomb, members of the board. The licensing, from a financial perspective as well, does provide for families that qualify. There are reduced rates that are available, and so that would be something that would need to be built in to the budget. If we're not licensed, those families would not be able to use that qualification paperwork, although we could come up with something very similar. So there would be that financial impact, possibly, but hopefully something that we would be able to keep neutral.
And that would definitely be built in so that our families in need would be have that offset, if not through the state, through our fee structure.
Ms. Kazi?
So, just so that I understand, is the licensing through DES, because that's where the childcare credit comes from, it's my understanding, and then also through Department of Health Services? And can you lay out for me where our licensing comes through?
So I'll have Ms. Marshall do that, and then we'll continue with Mr. Holcomb's question of what else we give up.
Awesome.
Thank you. The licensing is through the Department of Health Services. However, those qualifying rates, the families through the DES that would qualify for those rates.
So continuing, is there anything else that would be given up as a result of the licensing?
Yeah, I'm really looking for the non-financial. We're giving, we understand that, but what would that allow us, if we weren't licensed, how would that allow us to change the program in beneficial ways? Or what else, or what the negative and positive of not being licensed?
Some of the advantages Dr. Baca has already shared. But for example, during COVID, we needed to have a staff member who served as a runner due to the limitations for visitors on campus. But the licensing does require for that sight line of vision for the child, and especially at that parent pickup, so that at that pickup time, and parents are picking up at varying times in the afternoon, we had a dedicated staff member who served as that runner. And so obviously without the licensing, we could look at how we would do the check-in and the check-out procedures for families. The same, again, that when students check out of the group, for example, to use the restroom or something, that accompanying adult, whereas, as you know, during the instructional school day, a child can sign out and go use the bathroom and return. So there's just a little bit more on the licensing requirements for the supervision. Not that we would not provide a safe environment for the students through an after-school program, but we are very conscious of the requirements that are in place through the licensing. There are training requirements for the staff, but again, something that would be built in regardless of whether the program is licensed or not. So we would take a look at the program that we currently offer. As Dr. Baca said, it would allow, the big thing is that it would allow the required ratios to be lifted so that we could bring in more families. Now, of course, you have to balance that with the staff that is available as well, but we would not be held to those required ratios.
And let me just share, it's giving us the flexibility. So I know our staff well enough to know the quality is what we intend to continue to have, whether licensing requires it or not. I think there's still going to be that commitment to the proper training that needs to take place ahead of time. As Ms. Marshall said, the proper supervision. All of those things that we are now required to do, our intention would to continue to do that, but we would have greater flexibility at certain times of the year or at certain locations we're unable to. And so it provides us that flexibility. And then I want to clarify one piece in terms of the salaries. When we talk about the percentage increase, remember, our MAC workers are at different schedules. So 10% for a high-end schedule worker is going to be at a higher rate than a 17% at the lower. So I want Dr. Lomley to discuss that even though I think the minimum would be over $15 starting salary, there's still the difficulty of saying that may not even still be competitive enough, but our focus is let's retain who we have. The immediate need is to take families off the wait list, and then let's see what we can do in terms of our recruitment efforts to bring in more staff to keep the families that we currently have, plus take, if we have any more left on the wait list, off the wait list. So did I summarize that correctly, Dr. Lomley?
Could I just clarify? Oh, were you going to say something, Ms.?
Let's go, Dr. Lomley. and
Yes,
then
go ahead.
Ms. Gresham.
Yes, Dr. Baca, members of the board, executive team, the rate that we pay for our club leaders currently is really not competitive. So considering raising the beginning rate for our club leaders would help to make that job a little bit more attractive. But given what our classified staff, what our competition outside of education, I'm not sure of, raising our rates is going to make a big difference. We're hopeful that it will, and just make it more, those positions more attractive.
So, Ms. Gresham?
Oh, I just had a clarification question for Ms. Marshall. So you mentioned if we're giving up the licensing, we would still have, and also to reassure our parent responder, we would still have like the check-in, check-out procedures and things like that. It's not like everything would just go away, just to clarify.
That is correct. We would take the existing program that we have to ensure that safety for students. But as Dr. Baca said, it would just give us that flexibility of being able to pull more students off of the wait list. But we would look at, obviously, structure, just as we do during the school day and with our programs. We would still have a supervised program. It just possibly would not be a licensed program. An additional point on the licensing, the employees are required to have a TB test prior to employment. That is a burden on some due to the cost that is required with that. And so, again, without the licensing, it may allow for some recruitment of staff without that additional burden that would be on staff.
Ms. Spear and then Ms. Kasi.
I'm curious as to whether or not other organizations that provide similar levels of care as our MAC program are also examining whether to forego the licensing to give them that same flexibility to take advantage of the same opportunities that we're talking about here.
Ms. Spear, Mr. President, members of the governing board and executive team, districts who currently are unlicensed still have that issue, but they have greater flexibility in regard to the number of kids they can accept. But I can tell you that it's more of a recreational type of out in the playground or in the gym of 100 kids with 1 or 2 supervisors, okay? Other districts are exploring what we are exploring, where some are going to hold on to their license, but they're facing the very same challenges we would if we were to ours. Again, I'm not proposing that this is a long-term fix. It's how can we address the immediate need, understanding that we already know what we would need to do if we were ever to go back to a licensing program.
So let me, before you, I think another option I think we should consider is to go to DHS with a series of districts or the governor's office, and I'm happy to do that, and ask for a regulatory waiver or have them revise the rules so that they are now more reflective of market conditions.
And that would be appreciated. I would still suggest that as we wait for that, we proceed as though we would be unlicensed, because we could always continue our licensing and comply with the licensing requirements. We just want that. Again, we want to be able to inform our families sooner rather than later so they don't leave us.
Yeah, it's too bad the COVID emergency still wasn't going on. They could just do it by executive order. Ms. Spear?
Just one follow-up
Yeah.
question. have we had any feedback from some of our parent families with regards to whether or not they would continue care with MAC if we were to go unlicensed? I know that when I was looking for daycare for my children, licensing was a very critical piece of my matrix. So I'd like to get a sense of that.
Thank you. Yes, that is certainly something to consider. Right now, the biggest feedback we're getting from parents is that they need the after-school care. And although we are a licensed program and are proud of that and the accomplishments we've made with that licensing and the visits that they come out and do the spot checks and whatnot, I think at this point, the majority of the parents are more concerned about having a program and knowing that Madison would keep a quality with or without the license.
And just one example to share. Last year, we were able to refer families over for the summer programs to other agencies that could accommodate them. They have since asked, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Marshall, that we no longer do that because they do not have enough staff to run their programs.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Ms. Kotze, I'm sorry.
So just a few questions. I assume our teachers are not required to have TB tests. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So we have a higher threshold for TB tests for our MAC leaders and employees than we do for the teachers in the classroom who see our kids every day. Okay, next question. I assume our after-school program providers are not licensed?
They're not certified.
Okay. And then I assume we have substitutes who have 1 to 30 ratios in the classroom.
Yes, that is correct.
So, I mean, I feel like we are already providing environments that are safe to our students right now in our classrooms today. They are learning, they are safe. I will tell you, when I helped start Family Promise and we had to work with DES and the Arizona Department of Health Services, it felt as if they were making it hard for us to provide childcare to families that were experiencing homelessness. And so I have been really frustrated for a very long time with their cumbersome rules. And I feel that it sounds scary to move away from licensing, but this isn't for preschoolers. I mean, there's a reason why you have an accreditation process for preschool programs. Those have merit, but I feel like the requirements that they've put in place for elementary school students who are older, and I assume some of the ratios are probably very similar for a very wide range of age groups. I would be a very strong supporter because, again, I've seen these requirements. They're cumbersome. I feel like we've demonstrated we're providing safe environments for our kids currently and are not meeting the requirements that these licensing requirements require of MAC. It's kind of extraordinary that they leave the school day and suddenly we have to follow these extraordinary rules that we didn't have to follow during the majority of the day that they're with us.
So kind of my thoughts, what I would like to see is kind of a sliding scale, and I think I am concerned that going to 15 or what, like, let's pay them so it makes economic sense for us that we can, I mean, if it's 17, if it's 18, like, I want to see that ratio of, all right, here's the ratio of, at this level, here's how many new kids we need to make it, here's what we'd have to do with the rate, and balance all that out. And because what I don't want to do is increase the salaries, still be flat, still be struggling, still can't find the people. And I think I need to have an understanding of, because this is an enterprise fund, what are the tipping points in terms of rates? I mean, I don't want to gouge the parents by any means, but I would rather have a more expensive program that is at full capacity or 3/4 capacity than have a more affordable program where we don't have enough staff. Because I think when I see the balance of harm and good, I think we're to the point where we got, because the wait list is so long, and this is an enterprise fund for us that has benefits, and we need to get it right sized, and I think it is appropriate to treat it differently than other classifieds.
Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team, I see the spreadsheet that Ms. Garvey is working on, and all of that is included.
I kind of figured that.
I have one more. Were you
Welcome
finished?
first, and then,
Yeah, I wanted to, just for, because I'm looking for the information in the next presentation, try to give you direction. I don't see licensing as the holy grail, but I do recognize the power of a label, and, you know, being licensed, that is powerful, so that's one of the things you have to look at. But I want to see, you look at programming, looking at when I talk about looking at the pluses and minuses, is variation on what Dr. Osborne said about the balance, get the balance. But I want to see us to be able to serve in a quality way as many families as possible. That, for me, is the end goal. And whether it's licensed or we call it George, I don't care about that label, other than we do have to recognize, you know, that there is some value to that taking. But whatever we can, and I appreciate the flexibility. I think the flexibility is very important. So I didn't want to think you're thinking that the licensing is that critical from a practical spot, but I do understand the importance of the label. I want to make sure whatever we do, though, is quality. We take a lot of pride in the Madison, putting the label Madison on anything, and I think that has to be maintained.
Next question.
Thank you. Yeah, just, I mean, I would support this, this proposal. And so as far as the fees and things, I have had a lot of families actually tell me that they would be willing to pay more too, because they are on the wait list. They would rather have the service, and then some of them have said they might have to leave Madison if they don't have that service. So, and they would be willing to pay more. But I'm glad you brought up, Ms. Marshall, that there would still be an opportunity for families, because a lot of families still won't be able to afford it. So I'm glad that there would be something that we could still do for them. So I think that's it. Thanks.
And I'm a big supporter of going online. I mean, I've dealt with DHS over the past, and I remember when I was on the Governor's Regulatory Review Council, and they were like, oh, we have to have 5 inches of sand, and we go out and we monitor on it. I'm like, really? I think we'll be just fine. But and I'm happy to reach out. I'll probably call her tomorrow, one of the governor's people, and say, hey, a lot of districts probably a lot of districts want to be in our shoes, would prefer to be licensed, but you got to loosen up on the things that don't matter, especially for kids over the age of 5. And you're a deregulation governor, and if that doesn't go anywhere, I'll maybe volunteer to run a bill next year as a citizen. All right, any other comments, thoughts, or if we beat the MAC program to death? All right. Good luck, and find us some employees, team.
Thank you.
All righty. IBM and Budget Advisory Committee, item 6.3, information item. Dr. Baca.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the governing board and executive team. As you know, the next step into proposing a budget is to be able to share with you, after much discussion that you have had with us and that our team has had with our IBN team and our Budget Advisory Council. I will turn it over now to Ms. Garvey, our Deputy Superintendent, and Dr. Lomeli, our Executive Director for Human Resources, for this presentation, acknowledging that we have many members of our IBN team and Budget Advisory Council folks in our audience. We know it's been a long day for them. We know the discussions we've had have been long, so thank you for your patience, and we do very much appreciate you being here tonight. Ms. Garvey?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board and executive team. As Dr. Baca mentioned, Dr. Lomeli and I are going to do a joint presentation tonight. But first, I will start it just to give you a picture of the budget as we looked at it in IBN and Budget Advisory. And then after I go over what the projected budget looks like that we know of as of this moment, Dr. Lomeli will take the discussion for IBN, and then I will return to it for Budget Advisory. We've seen this before because not much has changed, and what we have built into our budget for next year for our projection is the base support level amount for inflation, which is 2%, because per statute it's either the lesser of 2% or inflation. So In this year, it would be 2%, which is an increase of almost $89 to the base level per each weighted student count. The governor did have something in his budget for results-based funding moving it to a permanent funding source in the Group B, and that is, as Dr. Osborne pointed out, being discussed at the legislature. Since it's only under discussion, that has not been added to our budget for next year. That's still outside of this. So we did not include any additional or new monies for results-based funding. We just remain status quo. We did see a decrease of ADM this year of 30 students. Going into next year, our budget will decrease by $133,000 for that. Then you can see we do have the inflation increase of $600,000, and there is a new item on the slide that was not here the last time I presented, and that is the Classroom Site Fund. The Classroom Site Fund used to be Prop 301. It expired, but the legislature did extend it. It's funded by sales tax revenue, so the amount fluctuates every year. The JLBC sets that amount on March 31st. So they set the amount for this year, and it's $708 per student. That is a decrease of $25 per student. However, last year's amount did include $192 of one-time only. So really, it is up over $100 per student. As such, we do have additional funds then that we can allocate to the budget, and there's some flexibility with those funds, but a lot of it still is around certified employees and support staff. Okay, so if we looked at $350,000 of that, being able to utilize that, that brings our increase in projected revenue up to $817,000. As we look at what expenditures are going to be increasing next year, the first item looks a little bit strange because it's actually a decrease in expenditures, which increases the amount that you have to look at, and that is just doing the teacher staffing roll-up, and that did decrease 7 FTEs. Our medical insurance, as we know, did come in at a 2.5% increase at $130,000, and then the AS retirement contribution is actually going down $57,000 district-wide, which gives us back $459,000 into the budget. And when you add that with the new projected revenue of $817,000, IBN and Budget Advisory, we're looking at this $1,276,000 as we prepared our recommendations to come forward to the governing board. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Lomely.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey. The IBN team has been hard at work meeting since last fall in November, and I want to take a moment to recognize the team that has put forth a lot of time, effort, and good conversations. From our certified team, we have Anna Andrews, Sierra Karsten, Jessica Hike, Casey Bilger. Our classified team, led by Linda Mock, Patrick McFadden, Deborah Wheeler, Matt Bloom. And our administrator team included myself, Barb Marshall, Priscilla Gossett, and Kyle DiMatteo. So really want to take a moment to thank them for their service on this effort. IBN, this is a list of priorities. These are all the issues that we discussed, and so this is a snapshot order of priority for our group. The top priority is salary. IBN is recommending a 3% increase to all staff, which comes in at the cost of $975,000. We also recommend that if there is any surplus in budget or available dollars, that there would be a % increase to staff. Because at the time that we completed our work, there's always things that change. So that's one of our recommendations. The other recommendation is to consider a stipend to staff if our average daily membership increases by 100 students on the 100th day, or consider a 1% salary increase to all employees.
And if I may interject here. So I think you understand we've had our individual discussions about, well, if we put that into a salary, we're obligating us down to the future. So I want to appreciate the IBN team for also recognizing that and then the challenges of increasing it mid-year and the like, and therefore we have that option for the $400 ADM stipend on the 100th day if we have 100 or more students. So I just wanted to clarify that for you as a board.
Benefits is always a top priority for our staff, and our recommendation is to keep our current benefits package, including continuing to fund the HSA contribution at $1,300. Salary decompression. This is an issue that we've had lots of discussions about over the years. This year, we have been working on a phase 2 of our salary decompression issue. And our recommendation is to fund the correction of our current employees, which is approximate cost of $241,000, and continue to target positions that are at the greatest discrepancy. And also communicate to all employees that this is an issue that we're actively working to fix. So it's something that we're continuing to work on, and we want to make sure that that's communicated to our staff. So talk to you a little bit about, discuss what our phase 2 is about. There are several issues that we have in our decompression. One of the big issues is our minimum raise increase has really compressed our top 5 levels on our classified salary schedule. We're also having issues with difficulty in attracting and retaining classified staff. And another big issue is our current employees are paid less than new hires with similar experience. So those are the big issues that we've been working on. We did a pilot in the fall with our bus drivers, and in that pilot we did create a schedule where it would include a 2% for each year of experience for our staff. And what we did was placed each of our staff members, our bus drivers, according to their experience. This resulted in an increase that ranged from $0 to $3.5 per hour, and that enabled us to level out our employees' salaries so that we no longer had the issue of our current staff making less than newer staff. It also allowed us to raise our starting pay so that we are more competitive with neighboring districts. So this is just a depiction of our classified salary schedule. As you can see that our first 5 grades are all at $12.80 an hour, which is the current minimum wage. The yellow indicates what our current this year's salary schedule where we max out. So a new salary schedule would provide an opportunity for additional growth for staff. So here's an example of what we've been working on is in our decompression program that we're proposing. We looked at our employees and their years of experience at that position. So this example here is a early childhood program aide. And if their current salary is $13.20 per hour, we looked at their years of experience and we placed them on the salary schedule. And when we placed them there, the first line, the employee was off by 12 cents. So we're proposing adding that 12 cents per hour to that employee to rectify the differences in where employees are placed. So this is an example of our proposal to fix our decompression issue, or our compression issue. Next slide. So this decompression issues are phase 2, and this is the proposal for paying for that. The M&O would cover the $241,000 cost. Our classroom site fund would cover the cost for doing the same thing for our teachers. Medicaid would cover the cost for our nurses and our special services staff. And community ed would cover the cost at $120,000 for community ed staff, and then food service would cover the cost for all of our food service staff.
So is community ed, is that going to be the pre-K, or I thought we were pulling out the MAC, and that would be a separate item, or walk me through how that jives with the earlier agenda item?
So this work was completed, our recommendation before what we just recently discussed. So we would go through and take the same approach that we did for our new guidelines for our club leaders. So apply the same work to replace our club leader staff.
The one advantage is the fact that we already have $120,000 dedicated
Yes.
to be able to do that and address our MAC workers and community ed salary schedules.
But since that's enterprise fund, we have flexibility anyway, so, okay.
Yes.
Please continue.
Can I ask, since you've already been interrupted, just a question about this. So is the total amount of the decompression, we're doing the decompression phase 2, the 241, that's just classified. But we have these additional costs that we're going to add in the budget you're bringing back. Is all of these added together?
So from the budget that Ms. Scarvey presented is from the M&O budget. That's the $241,000. But we have compression issues on these other areas that we can utilize the classroom site fund to fix it for the part of phase 2 for the teachers, students, cafeteria. It's all of those different other funds that are non-M&O.
Just want to make sure I was understanding you
Really,
correctly.
it's a $400,000 or $500,000 adjustment.
So the decompression phase 2 does include all staff. Student behavior support generated a lot of discussion. Our recommendation from IBN is to keep our permanent guest teachers at our middle schools, put effort into refreshing our PBIS and other support systems to really support teachers and working with student behaviors, provide release time for training and coaching of teachers, and also provide a stipend of $4,400 and we verified this could be funded from ESSER, to really emphasize and provide additional support for staff. So this would be allotted to each of our schools, and the total cost for that would be $43,600. Education growth incentive, this is an issue that we decided to keep it the same, and we'll table it till next year to do some further evaluation of the issue. Paid holidays, our recommendation is to add one holiday to our 30-hour classified employees, and the total cost for that is $12,450. Merit increase, this is for classified staff. Our recommendation is to keep it the same as what we do today, but to do some further research and looking at our classified staff evaluation tool and look at ways to expand what we do so that we could revisit this in the future. Regarding all Wednesdays TCT, our recommendation is to recommend to the calendar committee to change all Wednesdays to TCT. Also recommend to continue splitting TCT time between PLCs and professional development. Designated workday after break. IBN's recommendation is to recommend to the calendar committee that more planning time is needed and requested by teachers. And so the recommendation is for them to look at providing more planning time after breaks. Increased pay for teachers on sub-rotation. Our recommendation is to increase or to pay $30 to a teacher if a sub does not pick up an assignment. And this would be $30 for giving up their prep time. And the cost of that is $9,500 because we already pay our teachers to, when they cover during prep time. It's just not quite $30. It's more in the area of like $26. And then we also recommend to further study our, the cost and the impact on our subs. Splitting sub pay for elementary teachers. The recommendation is that if a sub does not pick up an assignment at the elementary level, then the elementary teachers would then be able to split the cost of a sub for that day. That is something that we do not do currently, so this would be new. It would be cost neutral because it is there are funds that are already budgeted for the sub, and we wouldn't be paying it if the sub isn't there. Evaluate, also recommendation is to evaluate ways to encourage subs to pick up sub positions more often. Overtime rate blending. This is an issue that we discovered with our classified staff when they take on an assignment that or a position that has a different hourly rate than what their full-time or the regular position is. They're reluctant to take on other assignments because when it comes to overtime pay, they don't feel that they are being compensated for their overtime pay, and we've discovered that it's an issue in how we communicate that to staff. So our recommendation is to communicate more clearly to everyone in the district, but also to research ways that we could represent that overtime pay better and more clearly on their pay stubs. And relaxed dress code. The recommendation is to develop a committee to review our district dress code and provide updated recommendations for employee dress and gather input from employees. Multi-job stipend for subs. This is low on our priority list, and recommendation is for 1 year to consider ESSER funds to incentivize subs to pick up multiple job assignments. And we didn't have a recommendation for an amount for that. It was low on our list of priorities. And the final one is a retention stipend, and this one, the governing board has already addressed this and approved this stipend, and it was approved before we completed our IBN process. So this is a breakdown of the total cost of our IBN recommendations. So $975,000 for salary increase, $241,000 for salary decompression, the $43,600 to provide the stipend for student behavior support, and $12,450 for the paid holiday, $9,500 to increase pay for teachers on sub-rotation, for a total of $1,281,550.
All right. I'm sorry. Jump the gun. Continue.
Okay, so now we are going to transition over to the Budget Advisory Committee. And here's a list of all the team members that we had on our committee. And I, too, would like to thank them for their creative thoughts and being open to looking at things in different ways, and just the really robust conversation that we had around things that are going on in the district, and just their contributions. Our slide is a lot shorter than the IBN presentation, but to get to it, there is a recommendation for a 3% increase for all employees, which was the $975,000. We too are in support of decompression for $241,000. After IBN brought to our attention that they were looking at the additional holiday for those 9 and 10-month employees who work over 30 hours per week, we understand the need and would really support that as well, which to give one additional holiday is the $12,450. And we had a lot of conversation in regards to the permanent subs. And our conversation was, we fully support the permanent subs remaining at the middle schools, but what about the elementary schools? And We had a lot of elementary input. We received more. We went out and got further clarification and what is the desire at the schools. And what did come back to us is that perhaps there really wasn't, it felt a need per se for a permanent sub at the elementaries, but at our schools, our Spanish immersion schools, so at Heights and Madison #1, and this could apply to Madison Simus and Madison Meadows, who have Spanish as elective, is it's very difficult to get subs for the Spanish portion of their classes. And for those teachers that teach in the Spanish immersion or classes and use their Spanish, obviously, they do receive a stipend for that. So the thought was, if we could increase the sub pay, so for that day, if a student was taught, or students are taught by a sub with the ability to speak and teach in Spanish, they should receive a little bit more pay for that day. And it was suggested that we look at $15 a day, so a total cost for that would be $12,000, and that would be for any of the schools that were using their Spanish in a Spanish setting, and see how that goes, and if that's the ability to actually attract more or get, so that our students don't lose any instruction during that time. So we are proposing that. And then if additional funds were to become available, our next item that we are recommending is a noon duty aid for 4 hours a day, one given to each school. A lot of conversation regarding this could maybe help alleviate what goes on at schools with teachers having to be there, with administrators coming to cover whatever it might be, just really helping too. We know that a lot of our parent organizations do help fund it, and that's been very difficult too for them, especially in raising funds in the past few years. So really, we gathered input from the parents as well, that they would like us to consider that. Our group felt that this was a very important, at a minimum, a very important thing to give to the schools. So that would be our next recommendation if funds became available. After that, it was salary increases, and then the enrollment stipend, and that's if additional funds become available, and it follows the same criteria that Dr. Lomeli and Dr. Baca presented for the ADM increasing by 100 on the 100th day. And that's it.
Questions? Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Holcomb.
just on the last slide, comparing the IBN and the budget advisory, the recommendations came down very close. Was that, was that forced? And I'm not saying this is a bad way, but the idea was that really modeled that way, or did that really come out of a natural progression of going through these things? Just a feel.
Yes, Mr. Holcomb, members of the board and executive team, I would say that it was totally natural how it came out. We did have several joint meetings where both sides were representing the conversations and discussions they were having, as well as their proposals. And the one thing I didn't mention, and I would be remiss, is that Budget Advisory very much wants to support any behavior supports that IBN team talked about. We were quite far down the road, and we knew that IBN had a lot more robust conversation about it than we did, and so we definitely would be in full support of the PBIS stipends for each school.
Other thoughts, comments? Couple of thoughts I have just to give some. I think the one area, I think the finance piece, I'm supportive. I think I like the bilingual subs. I think the only area that I'm concerned about is the additional after break prep day, because I'm just very worried that that's just going to become an extra vacation day, and I'm still not a huge fan of the extra, TCT Wednesday. I'm just very big on instructional time and time in the classroom, and that may be my bias, but the one that probably concerns me the most is, I would be concerned that if all of a sudden that planning day becomes 40% attendance, not going to be a happy camper, and that's my big fear. And that's, that's probably the biggest issue I have. TCT Wednesdays, I think we have enough. I'd rather have the classroom, but it's probably not a hill I'm going to die on the sword for.
So, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team, so that you can sleep tonight, The only proposed to next year's calendar really is a result of the fact that the New Year holiday, New Year's falls on a Sunday, and the federal holidays on a Monday. We have a scheduled workday. That would be the only one that we would say we could modify. The reason why I'm comfortable with proposing Wednesdays of TCT, it's really burdensome on many of our parents that they have to determine when do I have care, when don't I, because some Wednesdays are shortened, others are not. And so I'm comfortable with also addressing that issue to say it's a consistent schedule every Wednesday as well.
Yeah, I think the balance is if you're a parent that struggles on the TCT Wednesdays, it's just going to get worse. And we may not have max support for them. It's just my bias. Can you go back to the budget advisory members? The only thing I think, there we go. I don't see a ton. I think we have one community member, one parent. I think in the future, if we can get a few more parents and community members, I know because of COVID, everything, recruiting them, but I think, I know having a few more voices, and if you're one of two community parents with a lot of staff, it can be a little intimidating. So just a suggestion to improve the process, but I do like the way these two come together.
And Dr. Osborne, members of the board and executive team, now, I won't be here next year, so I can speak freely, correct? I want to just speak on to that point. First of all, I don't find these two representatives, the community member or parent, shying away from any at being outnumbered, one. Two, it has to be kept in a manageable manner for Ms. Garvey to work through it. It's tough enough recruiting some of these folks. And the final thing is we try to divide it amongst school sites so that no one school community has the domination over it. So it's between classified, certified areas, sites, and so forth. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I just think one or two more community members would be helpful, and I think the board could recruit and nominate additional people, and I may have a little more free time now that I'm for next year, but not that I'm nominating myself, but if you need somebody, and although I am kind of shy and intimidated. Ms. Kazi.
And I just want to echo what Dr. Osborne is saying. It's not just the input they provide. This is an opportunity to educate a member of our community, ideally someone maybe in a decision-making capacity, in an influential capacity, to really understand at a much deeper level what our budget looks like and the decisions we're having to make. And I think that is the biggest value. And so having those additional community members who can take what they learn, and then when they hear stories from other people that aren't necessarily true or accurate, can correct them. It is powerful, and it is opportunity that we lose when we don't have a robust community member representation.
Other questions, thoughts?
Just I'm sorry.
Mr. Hall.
I noticed the reference to the pilot program for the bus drivers, and that was mentioned, but what does it say? How successful was that? I mean, because you're using that, as I understood, as part of what we're doing for looking at the decompression otherwise. And I'd just like a little bit more information about that. And then, so I can finish up too, I also support the idea about the additional money for Spanish-speaking subs when they're in those classes. I think that sounds like a good idea at a minimal cost to me.
Because I want to be considerate of our IBN team back there. It's going to be a very quick answer. It was very successful. The bus stipend, the whole bus salary, very successful.
Fine, thank you.
Ms. Spear, you were next.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I just want to say thank you to all the members of both IBN as well as Budget Advisory, having served on those as a I guess a precursor to a budget advisory group prior to my being on the governing board. It's critical that we have that representation, not just within the community, but also within our staff and our various groups. And it leads to cohesion. It leads to a healthy culture. And I just wanted to say thank you to executive team that helped lead that, as well as all the members. And it is nice to be able to, while it may not be what the raise that I think all of us would love to be able to do when we drive by the Lotto billboard on the way here or whatever, it is nice to be doing a raise because many of us have been here when that was not the case. So I just wanted to say thank you.
So one other comment. I think one of the things that I would like to see is also some retention metrics so that because we keep hearing this is causing issues, and this goes forward with the MAC leaders too, because if we're investing money, if it's paying off, it also tells us if we haven't moved the needle, then we need to double down. Or it's, are we up, are we flat? And I think, and it may take several years to kind of tease out these trends, but, I think as we talked when Ms. Garvey went to the training, really saying, all right, here are the investments that we're making. What's the ROI and what's the metrics? So I think what I'd like to see is some kind of either baseline and then what we're hoping, or just something we can measure so that when the rest of you are here this time next year, you can say, okay, that worked and here's how we measured it.
Dr. Osborne?
Yes.
Real quick, I might as well chime in, but I think these are all excellent recommendations, and I agree with some of the comments of my other board members. And yeah, based on what I see as a parent and as from people I've talked to in the community, these are definitely needed. And I'm glad the PTOs had a little bit of input in there too, as far as the aides and stuff go, because when I was a PTO member and we asked the teachers what they wanted, and their number one thing was they just wanted more help, more aides in the classroom and at lunch, et cetera. So yeah, that's all I have. Thanks.
Anything else?
Just the last thing, I can't thank you enough, everybody, but how this has evolved. The process that we have now is light years ahead of what is done. It's been a continuing evolving process, and there's a lot to be proud of. This is one of the things, and it's not this way in every district by any means, and it's phenomenal. It's one of the things I'm most proud of that has been developed through cooperation from everybody, and it's a great testament to the school district.
Ms. Cosby?
I just want to add that I am amazed that it's the middle of April and we're very close, which is really amazing. And now we get to wait for the legislature. And hope springs eternal with me. So I will hope that, we'll see some numbers move and maybe we'll be able to do some more. But for us to have, the number that's realistic and what we've always been good at, and some good guidance, solid guidance on what needs to be done, I think, wow, amazing. It allows us it makes our job so much easier. I have to say, thank you.
I feel confident it will not be less. If anything, the legislative activity will generate more. So, but who knows? All right, thank you to everyone on IBM and the Budget Advisory. I think all of us board members are deeply appreciative. And we'll move on to action item 7.1, Audit Reports, Compliance, and Questionnaire. Dr. Baca.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne, members of the Governing Board and Executive Team. Ms. Garvey, our Deputy Superintendent, will just give a very brief overview of the current requirement for you to take action on this item.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board and executive team. This is a little bit different this year in that the governing board always does receive the audit reports and the compliance questionnaire. However, last March, the legislature did pass a law that now audits do need to be accepted by the governing board by a roll call vote. But I wanted to go over a little bit of our audit reports for you so that you know what we have here. We do have a comprehensive annual financial report prepared, and it takes, the one that we have to turn into the state is just an annual financial report. So it's a compilation of all the expenditures and all the revenue. The comprehensive report is 100 pages long. It has 3 sections. It has an introductory section that talks a lot about the district and what are some economic factors that we look at that impact the health, our own district health. It has a whole set of financial statements prepared in multiple ways, looking at enterprise funds, looking at proprietary funds, and then there is a statistical section for comparison over the past 10 years that's at the end of it. This report is compiled according to the Governmental Accounting Standards Board requirements, and it is the report that is used when we do go to sell bonds or when we go to get a rating, because it really puts our financial information in ways that investors can look at it and really determine the health of our district. With that, it also has a single audit report, which is required by the federal government since we receive over $750,000 in federal funds because of all the federal monies that came to districts in the past year. The reporting guidelines were extended a little bit, and that's why this report is coming out a little bit later. Instead of doing one of our federal programs, they actually had to end up auditing 3 of our federal programs. And I'm just really happy and pleased to report that we did not have any material exceptions or any exceptions that were out of the ordinary. I would like to, on the compliance questionnaire is for the Auditor General, and that goes over all of our procedures to make sure that they are in line with what is advised, or not just advised, what are the procedures that we must follow according to our Auditor General. And so that gets sent to the Auditor General. All of our reports get sent to the county and the state as well, and they will be on our web page for anybody to look at them who would like to read them. And I just want to thank everybody who participated, because they're in school offices, they are in the business office, they are in the upstairs and ed services, because they really, and they're in HR, they go through files and pull so much that honestly you feel like you have a few additional staff members, but they're not really yours. So they are here for quite some time, and I just really appreciate everybody's efforts in working with us to get the audit done.
Do we have questions, issues? I will accept a motion to accept the findings of the audit and compliance questionnaire.
So moved.
Ms. Spear with the motion.
Yep.
And Ms. Kazi with the second.
Dr. Osborne, we need a roll call vote.
So for clarification, Dr. Osborne, we want to be very technical that while we normally vote for this, we're going to call by each name to ensure that we're in compliance.
So we can't do it electronically?
Correct.
Okay.
So I will have Ms. Humphrey call the roll.
President Osborne,
While I hit the aye button, I say aye.
Vice President Holcomb,
Aye.
Member Gresham,
Aye.
Member Kazi,
Aye.
Member Spear.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All righty. By 5 verbal ayes and 5 electronic ayes, the motion passes. All right, discussion regarding future meetings. Dr. Baca.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne, members of the Governing Board and Executive Team. Just a reminder, on the 26th, we will have our showcase at 5:45. Heights will do their showcase in the lobby, and so rather than it as be 6 o'clock in a video presentation, it will be a lobby presentation starting at 5:45. And just a reminder, and I'll remind again, their students will also remain behind to lead us in the pledge in both English and in Spanish. So if you do not know the pledge in Spanish, I suggest you brush up on that. We don't know if there's going to be any political agenda that's being proposed at this time. There hasn't been, so that may not actually make it on as an informational item unless something changes. Dr. Osborne, you had requested that Ms. Marshall present a summer academic remediation plan. It's something that you were briefed on in the last board briefing, but we'll go ahead and present it in public. And then the calendar update, that just aligns us with some of the adjustments that need to be made per what we discussed later tonight. It's not an action item, it's just an informational item for future. Based on tonight's presentation with IBN and Budget Advisory, we'll be presenting you my budget recommendation. I want to reassure you, Dr. Guerin and I are working closely together. Although I recommend a budget, she has to live with it. So it will be aligned and considerate of that. And then that's where we will bring forward all of the different salary schedules, and especially when we get to our salary ranges and extra duty pay for our classified staff and their contracts, we will include some information in regard to what was the final outcome of the discussion we had tonight with our community education staff.
Will that, when we see the action items on salary schedule, will that include the MAC recommendations as well, or is that a separate?
So when we present the salary schedules, remember we said one of the ways to do this is we have to separate the community education salary out. We're going to do that, and that's where we can discuss it. So each one of these, it's not like a consent agenda. You can take action on each individual one. Okay. We don't think, but we may have the guaranteed maximum price for the renovation of the Meadows Gym, but we'll let you know if we bring that forward. Forward into May 10th, we have a 5 o'clock, our end of the year recognition program in the Madison Center for the Arts, followed by our governing board meeting. That's where we will have a revision of our budget, our second revision. That's the major thing there, but also have an information in regard to the need to call for a district additional assistant override. You won't take action at this meeting. That's where, going on to May 24th, you will take action during that time. Because that's a promotion ceremony, our meeting will begin at 3 p.m. In order to take action on our proposed budget for the 22-23 school year, and the call and discussion and then call for the election of our district additional assistance override. I'm almost there. This is the most meetings I'm covering, but I only have these number left. Then June 14th, you'll have the executive session with me on my final evaluation, as well as the public hearing on the proposed budget in order to adopt it during the regular meeting. You'll see various consent agenda items there. We're going to also give information items for the Welcome Back celebration, the donations that you always are so generous in receiving for our staff. And the only two action items would be taking action on the district's budget and then the superintendent's performance pay.
Any comments, questions, revisions? Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Kazi and Mr. Holcomb with the second. Please vote. This meeting is adjourned.